In the frenzy of shattered glass and echoing gunfire at the cliffside estate, Finn's world narrowed to a single, visceral moment as Steffi's scream tore through the chaos, propelling him forward like a man possessed. One heartbeat later, he felt the searing impact of metal against flesh, an agonizing shock that stole his breath and buckled his knees even as he threw himself across his wife's trembling form. The bullet, meant to silence Steffi's passionate pleas and end Luna Nozawa's tormented vendetta in one terrible instant, found its true mark in Finn's side, tearing through muscle and puncturing lung as crimson blossomed across his pristine shirt. The world tilted, the sprawling Pacific vista through the floor-to-ceiling windows blurred into a smear of blue and gray, and Finn's vision swam with the white-hot gleam of panic in Steffi's eyes. Through the haze of pain, he saw Sheila Carter-Sharp's frail body slumped on the marble hearth from an earlier wound, Luna's slender frame frozen in horror beside the smoking pistol, and Steffi cradling his head as though the two of them alone could hold reality together. His own hand found hers at the cost of agonized concentration, but the effort only sent another wave of agony rolling through his side, a reminder that the violence he had sought to mend was now tearing him apart. As officers descended, guns drawn, and paramedics burst through the French doors, Steffi's desperate voice broke over the cacophony. "Finn, stay with me. Please, Finn, stay with me." And he managed a faint, broken smile before the world went white and he slipped into oblivion. When Steffi snapped back to consciousness in the emergency room, her relief at finding Finn alive was swiftly eclipsed by fresh terror as monitors beeped warnings of internal bleeding and plummeting oxygen levels. She sat by his gurney, sleeves soaked with his blood and her own tears, her mind a broken loop of guilt and grief. If only she had moved sooner, if only she had been stronger, if only she could have shielded him instead. The attending trauma surgeon spoke in curt, clipped sentences. "His vitals are unstable. We need to operate immediately." But Steffi heard none of it, her world condensed to the sound of Finn's ragged breaths and the distant wail of sirens fading into the sterile hush of the ER. She clutched his hand so tightly her fingers ached, her knuckles white as the flood of self-reproach threatened to drown her. Every flashback to their early days, the laughter on the veranda of their first home, the soft vulnerability in Finn's eyes when he first saw Hayes's grin, now felt like shards of a shattered past, irreparable fragments of a love that Luna's bullet had nearly destroyed. When the surgeons finally emerged with weary eyes and scrubbed faces, Steffi was already rocking back and forth in the waiting area, whispering prayers under her breath, her fashionable wardrobe crumpled and blood-stained, her heart poised on the razor's edge between hope and despair. "He's stable for now," they said, voices sounding distant and dreamlike, "but he's lost a lot of blood. It'll be a long night." Steffi nodded numbly, every line of her body taut with exhaustion and dread, as she prepared to endure a vigil of endless hours, desperately hoping that the man who had once risked everything to save her would find enough strength to survive this tragic twist of fate. Meanwhile, Luna Nozawa's collapse under the weight of her own horror sent her spiraling into a chasm of guilt from which there was no immediate escape. At first, she remained upright only because her legs trembled with adrenaline, her eyes fixed on Finn's motionless form, as if its very stillness would absolve her if she could will him back to life. Luna's breath caught in her throat as she watched paramedics clamp a neck brace in place, their practiced efficiency a cruel counterpoint to the chaos she had unleashed. Then, seized by the bitter realization that her rage had nearly destroyed the man who stood between her and Steffi's love, and that he had taken the bullet meant for the woman she blamed for her pain, Luna's knees buckled and she crumpled to the polished tile, hands pressed to her mouth to stifle a sob that shook her to the core. She lay curled in the fetal position as a detective crouched beside her, gently prying her wrists from the lingering weight of the pistol she had dropped, and spoke in low tones about charges and custody. But Luna heard none of it. Her mind had retreated into a maelstrom of remorse. Every memory of her mother's final rejection, every moment of Steffi's kindness turned betrayal, now merged into a single, haunting vision. The flash of Finn's sacrifice, the glint of the bullet, the hush that fell over the room when he collapsed. She saw herself as the architect of this devastation, and the shame coiled around her heart like a living thing, squeezing the breath from her lungs more savagely than any bullet ever could. As night deepened, Steffi remained at Finn's bedside, her eyes rimmed red, her hands stiff, refusing to leave even for a moment. Nurses offered coffee and blankets, but she shook her head, her focus narrowing to the faint flicker of the heartbeat line on the monitor. She whispered to him of their future, of children's laughter in sunlit gardens, of quiet mornings with coffee on the veranda, of a love that could withstand any trial. Her words trembled on her lips, fragile threads she hoped would anchor Finn's spirit back to her. Hours later, when the second round of surgery ended in the early dawn and a surgeon emerged to announce that Finn had weathered the crisis, but would need weeks of recovery and careful monitoring, Steffi collapsed into Ridge's arms, the two of them clinging to each other as though their very lives depended on it. Ridge's normally steely composure broke as he allowed himself to weep for the near loss of his son-in-law and for the fractures this wound would inflict on the family. Taylor, who had stayed by Steffi's side from the first moment, placed a gentle hand on Steffi's shoulder, her own grief tempered by fierce resolve. She would see Finn through this, just as Finn had stood by her in her darkest hours. Meanwhile, word of Finn's heroic wound spread through the rumor mill of Los Angeles's glitterati, morphing into conflicting narratives. Some heralded him as the ultimate knight, sacrificing himself for love. Others whispered that Sheila's earlier confession and Luna's breakdown would lead to a reckoning that no surgery could undo. The public uproar over Luna's state of mind intensified, with commentators questioning whether she should face prison or be consigned to psychiatric care, and whether Finn's sacrifice might be used in court to argue for leniency or for retribution. In the quiet aftermath, Luna's anguished confession to a psychiatrist that she had never intended to kill but had wanted to be heard became a focal point for debates over criminal responsibility versus mental health. Each session peeled back another layer of her trauma, revealing the depth of her mother's betrayal and the void it left in Luna's psyche. A void she attempted to fill with vengeance until her plans misfired and inflicted irrevocable harm on the one person who never failed to love her. As Finn lay in his hospital bed, tubes and dressings a stark reminder of survival's precariousness, he awoke to Steffi's tear-streaked face and the gentle pressure of her hand on his. In that moment, he knew that the road to recovery would be long, not just physically but emotionally. He would carry the bullet scar as a testament to love's power and to the fragility of trust in a world rife with secrets. Steffi vowed to stand by him, to hold him steady while he healed, even as she grappled with her own guilt for being the unwitting catalyst of his fate. And Luna, confined to a psychiatric ward under watchful eyes, faced the torment of consciousness. Each night, she relived the blast of the shot, the flash of pain on Finn's face, the moment when the weight of her grief became the weapon that wounded the man she came to trust. In her darkest moments, Luna wondered if her sanity would fracture like glass, if her remorse would drive her beyond the brink of hope. The only certainty in this maelstrom of pain and redemption was that from the echo of a stray bullet, an even greater drama had been unleashed. One that would test every bond of family, challenge every definition of justice, and demand from each survivor a measure of forgiveness that might prove more painful than any wound. In the world of the bold and the beautiful, bullets may stray, but the scars they leave are never accidental, and as Finn fought to breathe through the pain, Steffi whispered her promise that love would be the salve, even as she braced for the reckoning that would follow Luna's tragic remorse. In the sterile hush of the trauma center, time slowed to a cruel crawl as monitors flared red and blue around Finn's bed, each beep and whoosh a grim reminder that despite the surgeon's desperate battle, his heart was losing its war. Steffi sat beside him, her hand pressed against his cold palm, her tears pooling on the crisp white sheet, and she watched the lines on the monitor grow flatter with each passing second. Ridge and Taylor flanked her. Ridge's face ashen, his usual stoicism shattered by the sight of his daughter's grief. Taylor's eyes rimmed red with exhaustion and futile hope, but none could offer what Steffi needed most, the miracle that would bring Finn back. And in that moment, all the schemes and rivalries that had defined their lives seemed grotesquely small beside the raw ache of impending loss. Finn's breath rattled once, twice, then stopped. The doctors' voices rose in controlled alarm as they worked to revive him, but when they stepped back, shaking their heads, Steffi understood without words that her husband, the man who had given her Hayes, who had believed in forgiveness even for a woman like Luna, who had dared to love Sheila Carter Sharp's reckless heart, was gone. There was no triumphant reversal, no last-second twist. The bullet had done its work, and Finn's life extinguished like the flicker of a candle in the wind. The aftermath was a blur of wailing sirens and faceless uniforms escorting mourners in and out of the hospital chapel, where Steffi collapsed into Ridge's arms, her sobs raw and ragged as she whispered, "He's gone, Daddy, he's really gone," and Ridge, for once, had no words of comfort, only the deeper sorrow of a father who had watched his daughter lose the man she loved. Taylor supported Steffi to the waiting room, where Brooke Logan Spencer arrived in a whirlwind of grief and fury. Fury at Luna for the chain of events that led to this tragedy, fury at fate itself for taking Finn before he could fully thaw the ice around Sheila's past, fury at herself for ever believing that love could conquer all. Steffi, drenched in tears and trembling so violently she could barely stand, found herself trapped between the adrenaline of panic and the cold inertia of disbelief, her mind an endless loop of he was here, and now he's not. And every memory of Finn. His gentle smile, the way he cradled Hayes, the warmth of his arms, became a dagger twisted in her heart. The police arrived to take Luna into custody. Handcuffed and hollow-eyed, she stood at the edge of the scene, shaken by guilt so profound that she could barely meet Steffi's gaze. And in that desperate instant Steffi's grief turned to fury and shattered compassion alike as she screamed, "You killed him!" Before turning away, her sob loud enough to pierce the police barricade, as Ridge and Liam, arriving breathless after racing from the beach house, hovered helplessly, their eyes reflecting the same horror. The funeral, held under storm-gray skies at the cliffside estate where Finn had fallen, was a testament to the collision of love and loss. White roses and lilies decorated the casket, arranged by Taylor's steady hands even as her tears flowed. Hayes, dressed in a tiny suit borrowed from Liam, pressed a drawing of his daddy into Steffi's hand. Ridge, Brooke, Taylor, Liam, Hope, Wyatt, and Bill Spencer, each in varying shades of stunned disbelief, formed a solemn circle as the pastor spoke of sacrifice and the redeeming power of love, words that felt both hollow and vital in the face of such devastation. Steffi stood at the front, pallbearers lowering Finn's casket with mechanical precision, and as the lid closed she placed Finn's favorite watch inside, its face forever frozen at the moment he died, to keep him with her always, then collapsed to her knees, her scream of anguish blending with the roar of the surf below. Luna, escorted in by detectives, watched from a distance, her own tears tracing lines of regret down her pale cheeks as she mouthed silent apologies to a ghost, understanding in her shattered soul that Finn's death was a wound no trial could heal. In the ensuing days, Forrester Creations and Spencer Publications felt the aftershocks. Ridge announced a memorial line in Finn's honor, a couture collection inspired by the gentleness he brought to every room, while Bill Spencer demanded that Liam return to the boardroom now that the man destined to unite their families lay in an unmarked grave. Taylor, hoarse from mourning and determined to preserve Finn's legacy of compassion, launched a foundation in his name, devoted to supporting families torn apart by violence. But each fundraising gala felt painfully empty without Finn's warm presence to guide them. Steffi, in the solitude of her bedroom, surrounded by photographs of happier times, found herself unable to sleep or eat, her heart ragged by grief so intense that it threatened to swallow her whole. Hayes's innocent laughter in the next room became both balm and torment, proof that life continued even as hers had fractured beyond repair. She spoke to Hayes of Daddy in the past tense, each utterance a painful reminder that Finn's protective embrace would never again chase away her fears. Nights were the worst, when the house was silent and she expected to hear Finn's soft footsteps in the hallway, only to be met by the hollow echo of emptiness, and she would clutch the watch he'd left behind, its hands forever still, and beg the universe for a miracle that would bring him back. The legal fallout began as Luna's case went to trial. Prosecutors used Finn's death as evidence of the maximum severity of Luna's actions, demanding life in prison, while Luna's defense painted her as a tragic figure undone by childhood trauma, to which Finn's sacrifice lent a poignancy that captured national attention. Steffi, once intent on retribution, found herself issuing a statement that Finn would have wanted forgiveness over vengeance. But her voice cracked under the weight of her grief, and for a moment she wondered if she could forgive the granddaughter who had taken her husband's life. Week by agonizing week, Steffi navigated a labyrinth of sorrow and obligation. Public appearances to manage the narrative around Finn's memorial capsule collection, private moments of collapse into Taylor's arms, negotiating with CBS producers about integrating her real-life grief into the show's storyline, and sleepless nights composing letters to Finn's memory in a journal she carried everywhere. Through it all, she clung to Hayes as both reason to live and reminder of Finn's enduring love, teaching her daughter to say, "I love you, Mommy," with a voice that trembled with her own heartbreak. At night, Steffi would whisper to the darkness, "I will love you forever," and imagine Finn replying in a voice only she could hear, a final promise that though he was gone, his spirit would remain the tether that kept her from drifting into despair. In the wake of Finn's death, the Forrester-Spencer dynasty stood fractured. Ridge devoted himself entirely to Taylor and Hayes, brokering peace between the families as they collectively mourned. Liam retreated from the boardroom. Engulfed in guilt that he had not protected his brother-in-law, Bill Spencer publicly offered condolences, but behind closed doors maneuvered to fill the power vacuum Finn's absence created. And Luna, locked away in a psychiatric facility pending trial, spent her days haunted by visions of Finn falling across Steffi's trembling arms, her guilt a torment more relentless than any prison sentence. And through it all, Steffi carried Finn's memory like a shard of glass against her heart, sharp and beautiful, an eternal testament to a love that refused to die even when the man she had given her heart to did. In Los Angeles's glittering world of fashion and power, no scandal or betrayal would ever again hold as much weight as the stray bullet that took the life of Dr. John Finn Finnegan. And the bold and beautiful tapestry of that dynasty would forever bear the indelible stain of his ultimate sacrifice.